R2 is shipping to customers in just a couple days. And I've talked a lot about the tech and autonomy that's going into that platform. But there's something that I haven't talked as much about, and that's how it does off-grid. Rivian is an adventure brand. They want to build a vehicle that can take you anywhere at any time to see anything that you want. And I've talked a lot about the tech and autonomy for on-road, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of tech that goes into making the off-grid and off-road experience really great as well. They've actually got really cool stuff that goes into making all this happen. And this applies to the R2 just as much as it applies to the R1. And don't worry, even though I don't have an R2 yet, we will be testing with it. But for now, I wanted to take a look at the R1 and all of the tech that goes into making it actually a great adventure vehicle, because a lot of that same DNA is in the R2. So on that note, we took a trip down to southern Utah to go off-grid, off-road, and put all of that tech to the test. We're going to cover suspension, we're going to cover range estimates, we're going to cover power outlets, we're going to cover it all. So come along for the ride. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Mike, you're watching Thunderbolt Auto, and in this one, we're going off-grid. If you enjoy EVs, tech, or general shenanigans, hit subscribe because that's what this channel is all about. Also, hot off the press, we've got merch. If you're interested in a t-shirt or a sticker, you can find it at shop.tvoltauto.com or in the links down below this video. Our destination for this adventure is Moab, Utah. The surrounding areas just have tons of trails for mountain biking, ATVs, and off-road vehicles. And it's a desert landscape with red rock, absolutely gorgeous place with a ton to see, lots of different trails to go on of varying levels of difficulty. And honestly, it's a great testing ground for what we're doing here. Because being in the middle of the desert, it's kind of unforgiving. Some of these trails have fairly big rocky obstacles and temperatures can be extremely high. And that's where this video sponsor Vion comes in. I've been using their sunshades for a while, but let me tell you, they were perfect for going down to southern Utah. Moab can be kind of hot and unforgiving. And even though it isn't even the hottest part of the season yet, we were definitely feeling that strong sunshine and heat. So having these sunshades really helped keep things cool, keep the sun out of the cabin, and the bonus is the AC doesn't have to work as hard. They have these new ones that are color matched to the ocean coast interior, and it looks fantastic. If you're interested, you can use my promo code TVOLT to get 10% off. And so our adventure began. We loaded all of our gear up in the R1S and we headed south. We stopped in Green River at the Rivian Charger. We actually didn't really need to stop in order to make it to our campground. We had like 52% when we arrived at the Charger, but we wanted to top up because it was very near our final destination and we wanted to get a little bit of extra juice so we could tootle around and have fun off-grid. True out of spec style road tripping, we pulled in with 52%. We did not need to charge here, but we didn't need to charge to get to our destination. We are in Green River, Utah at a lovely RAM station that I've never seen any other humans at. But there's so many different stalls. And they actually have real trailer pull-throughs, which is incredible. So yeah, we're not stopping here because we need to get to our destination. We're in Green River, Utah, and we have another probably, I think, 50 miles to go or something like that. It took us about half of our battery to get here. But we're charging because number one, we want to get some food. We're going to have dinner. But number two, we're topping off the battery because we're going to be off grid for a few days. And so we want to have enough charge to go tootle around on the trails and have some fun for the next few days. So even though we don't need to charge to get to our destination, here we are. And then it was off to our campsite. But of course, we had to play around a little bit before we got there. And on the trail to our camping spot, we actually encountered a pretty big obstacle that we were not counting on. And we had no choice but to turn around or go through. And we chose to go through. And honestly, I was quite impressed. So let's walk through it actually. So a quick word about how the R1 suspension is set up. It has air dampers that allow you to raise or lower the vehicle, but it also has a hydraulic component that allows it to use hydraulic fluid to change the roll control of the vehicle. So for example, when you're doing high speed around a track, It uses valves in the hydraulic system to keep things stiff and flat so that it can handle curves very well. But when you're in an off-road scenario, you want the opposite of that. Instead of having the vehicle very stiff from side to side, you want to allow for maximum flexibility so it can actually link the hydraulic fluid from side to side and allow it to flex a little bit more. And that really gives it a lot of versatility. So that's what all-terrain mode is really doing us a favor on, is it's allowing for that extra flexibility that you wouldn't otherwise get. So let's go ahead and roll forward and you can see how that's working. So at this point, we've got very high compression here.
I know.
And we're keeping the wheels on the ground. And just right there, just a little bit, you can start to see that wheel come off. And while there's definitely off-road vehicles that can flex way more than this is flexing, honestly, for a factory stock system on a luxury SUV, this is quite an impressive amount of flex that it has here. And this is where the traction control comes in, because at this point we have a wheel off the ground. And naturally, the way differentials work, it just sends the power to the wheel that's easiest to turn, which is not helpful because the wheel that's easiest to turn is off the ground and this one is on the ground. So we can watch here. Come on, Baymax, figure it out. Yeah, there it is. And eventually it did figure it out. If this was a quad motor Rivian, this would probably be a little bit less of an issue because each wheel has its own motor and it can just crank the motor on the side that has traction and be done with it. But since this is a dual motor vehicle, one for the front two wheels and one for the back two wheels, it has to be a little bit more creative. In this case, because it just has open differentials, there's no kind of limited slip functionality, it actually uses the brakes to get through this. You need to actually push a little bit more on the accelerator pedal to spin the wheels, and the computer can observe what wheels are spinning and what ones aren't, and if you're moving forward, and it can clamp down on the brake on this wheel that is in the air with no traction, and clamping down on that brake will allow it to send power to this wheel. And you can't really see it here, but the same thing is sort of happening on the back. And at this particular point, although you can't see it, the vehicle is actually on two wheels. This one is on the ground and this one is on the ground, but both this wheel and that wheel are in the air. And so gravity is taking its course here and comes down. And I know it looks a little bit extreme on the outside, but on the inside, that actually did not feel abrupt at all. It felt just like a very gentle rock forward onto the front wheel. And again, all of this suspension articulation and softness in off-road really is just a good testament to the engineering that Rivian put into their suspension. Come on, baby. So again, we're having that same traction happening there. The back wheel is up in the air now, and so it's having to use the brake to clamp down on that to send power to the other wheel. So although it's maybe not as graceful as it would be with the quad motor, it is able to figure it out and drop power where it needs to go. That is it. And at this point, unfortunately, the stabilization on my camera was kind of tilting the view, but you can see how tilted the vehicle was. At this point, I think we're pretty close to 30 degrees of tilt. So this is pretty far tilted. And honestly, the vehicle just handled it extremely well. And that was the toughest part of it. But yeah, this is how we started off the trip. And honestly, I came away quite impressed with how capable this system is. And another note on this, the tires didn't come into play as much in this scenario. They'll come into play a little bit later in the trip. But I actually have the 22-inch sport wheels with a pair of Nokian 1 HTs. And they are decent off-road, but they're not meant for off-road. They're definitely meant for on-road. But even with that and the completely stock suspension setup that this R1 has, it's pretty impressive with how capable it is. So then we were off to the campsite, and of course, even though we were very off-grid, there's no facilities anywhere, we had a movie night. So I set up the popcorn machine, we set up a screen on the rocks, and we enjoyed, because the next day we had a big adventure. All right, so we made it to our camp spot. It's kind of windy, so I'm filming from within here so you can actually hear what I'm saying. But we got ourselves a beautiful spot out here. And we're just chilling for the evening. And tomorrow we're going to go hit some more trails. We did hit that one trail on the way in. that was actually a little bit more aggressive than I anticipated, but you know, the Rivian handled it absolutely fantastically. Um, you know, it's interesting to feel just the instant difference in ride quality going into all-terrain mode. It loosens the tension inside of the hydraulic lines so that the wheel travel can be a little bit more, and it's a little bit more soft and forgiving on that. It would make for a horrible highway ride because you would be tilting and rolling all over the place. But on off-road trails, it does a fantastic job of just really smoothing out some of those huge ruts, and you just glide over it. The suspension in R1 really is incredibly flexible and very, very powerful. But yeah, we're out here having a great time. Tomorrow we'll do a little bit more experimentation with the technicalities of what's happening with the drive modes. But even though this isn't necessarily a technical deep dive adventure, it's so fun to experience how well the tech works off the grid. And speaking of being off the grid, I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, we've got a campsite movie night. So we have our screen, just a sheet hanging from the rocks, and a pretty cool setup actually here. I'll walk you through it. We've got our Pico projector right here connected to a nice little USB battery bank, HDMI over to the laptop, and our Bluetooth speaker for a nice campsite movie. I'll have an Amazon link down below for all of this stuff if you're interested. But this is what we call roughing it, but not really roughing it. We're techie roughing it. And of course, no movie would be complete without popcorn. So we are going to take advantage of having the Rivian here and do the full-on popcorn machine. So I am just going to pop in over here, and we're going to turn on the outlets, and we can just turn them on for 1 hour, should be plenty. Okay, outlets are on. Okay, and we have power. Yes. So we're gonna turn this baby on and get it warming up. And we are cooking. We've got our oil, we've got our popcorn in here, and the popcorn is just about to start. You know, I'm all for these silly gimmicks when you're out camping. And like, make no mistake of it, we are camping. We are, you know, in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing, there's other campers nearby, and that's basically it. No facilities, no electricity, no plumbing. But we got ourselves some popcorn, and it is about to start popping. It's coming out here. So with that one, I will see you tomorrow. We're going to watch our movie and head to bed. And it is the next morning. We slept through a little bit of rain and a little bit of wind, but mostly it was nice. And we have breakfast on the griddle. Yummy breakfast burrito. Thank you, Chef Jaren. While we were camping and using the outlets for cooking and for popcorn making and all of that stuff, one concern that I had was actually with the power rating of the outlet that's in the rear. It's a 1500 watt maximum, which is fine for most household appliances, but we did bring along a kettle, for example, that was rated for exactly 1500 watts. So riding just right on that limit. And fortunately, it handled it well, but with no extra headroom. If we wanted to run that kettle, it had to be the kettle and the kettle only with nothing else plugged in. And this is actually where the R2 has a nice advantage. It's going to have a field outlet accessory that you can actually plug into the charge port on the outside of the vehicle that will give you up to 2400 total watts of power output, which is a nice step up. And in that case, we would have been able to run the kettle as well as the griddle or the popcorn machine or something else at the same time. So kind of nice to have that extra power there. Editor Mike here with a couple of addendums on that. The field outlet that they showed actually has a 1900 watt rating, and it's not set to release immediately with R2. It's coming a little bit later. So this was our route for the next day. We started off by coming down this highway right here, and we went into Gemini Bridges, which is an extremely cool landmark in southern Utah where you can actually see some arches from above with beautiful red rock, which is, indicative of this whole area, but an absolutely gorgeous drive. But coming in from the highway, this is where it turns into an off-road trail. And granted, it's not a particularly aggressive trail, but it is an off-road trail. After seeing Gemini Bridges, we came back out to the main road, drove down to here, entering Canyonlands National Park, and then at this point, it split off to another off-road trail, and the entire rest of the drive was all on this off-road trail. So my goal for this day, aside from just seeing some really pretty stuff, was to see how accurate the range estimates are when you're on an off-road trail. And since Rivian partnered up with Google for their mapping software, they actually use a lot of Google's intelligence and database for that range calculation. And it takes into account a whole bunch of conditions and your driving style and all of that. There will be a whole video about that later on. But in this one, I wanted to see if any of that knowledge applied to off-road trails, because it is an entirely different animal. We're not covering a ton of distance. This entire loop is only about 24 miles or so, but you're moving a lot slower. You're going to be in all-terrain mode, so you're using all-wheel drive. You're constantly monitoring and changing torque on the different wheels in lower traction scenarios. And so I wanted to see if the range estimates held up, even though it's an entirely different scenario. Okay, and we are on our way, and we've got a whole route planned for the stuff that we're going to see, the trails we're going to take. But even though this isn't autonomy focused, you definitely can bet that we're going to be doing this the Thunderbolt way. So let me talk you through the plan. Okay, so this is our camping spot here. We're going to come down to visit Gemini Bridges, which is a really cool landmark down here. And we're going to take this whole network of trail systems down through Potash Road. There's a whole bunch of really nice overlooks and just cool touristy things to see. And we will end in Moab. So we'll be monitoring this along the way as we get to each stop. So with that, there's our plan, and we are ready to head out. So let's go. Okay, so we just arrived at the parking for Gemini Bridges, a lot of which was off-road. We are in all-terrain mode, and we're at 69%. Nav estimated we would get here at 70%, and I doubted because it was an off-road trail, but that's pretty close. Anyway, we're gonna go check out Gemini Bridges because it looks awesome. Okay, so we just finished Gemini Bridges, absolutely gorgeous. And our next stop is going to be Shafer Canyon Road, and the initial estimate was 65%. Now it's estimating 63%. So let's see how accurate that is. Also, just the view from the parking lot even is very nice. Okay, let's go. So we're just about to start the switchbacks. We're down to 61% now, but these switchbacks that we're about to do are all very steep downhill. So it's estimating 62% on arrival now instead of the 63 initially. But I mean, I would still say that's within margin of error, but we'll check in. But I'll be honest, I was doubting the estimate. But now I see why it was estimating that. I'm impressed. Also, look at this view. This is incredible. But yeah, so I need to focus here on the switchbacks, but we'll check in at the bottom. I'll eat my words. I'm impressed. we're at 62%. So from the initial, like when we started this segment, 63 was the original estimate. We're literally just feet away from the pin here. Jaron, go ahead and show them where we're stopped here on a little pullout. Absolutely gorgeous view. We literally hit the 62% mark, like just feet before we hit the pin. So, you know, based on the initial 63% accurate or 63%, I would say it's pretty accurate. They do range estimates on trails, folks. Okay, so the next segment, the next pin in our map is Gooseneck Overlook, which is, where is it? It's right there. So we got a bit to go. And it's saying 63% now for that one. So again, this must be all just regen downhill. So we'll check in when we get there. But in the meantime, I'm going to be enjoying these views. Okay, so here we are. We are at Gooseneck Overlook, and it is absolutely gorgeous out here. A little disappointment though. We lost our range estimate. We're just like a quarter mile from the pin, but for all intents and purposes, we're here. We are at 62%. So we didn't quite make the 63% estimated arrival. We stopped to go to the bathroom, and when we got back in, the range estimate was gone. Rivian does use cloud connectivity to get range estimates, and that's how they're so accurate. But when you're in a situation like this, one would hope that it either caches the range estimates, so when you get out and back in, it stays, or it uses some sort of offline estimate that is maybe a little bit rougher. But instead, we just get no range estimate at all. It just disappeared for the entire trip, which is kind of disappointing. So we'll just go, for the rest of it, we'll just go off of the estimates that it created at the beginning and try and figure that out. But in the meantime, we're at this beautiful overlook. We're going to have some lunch. Okay, so we just finished lunch, and we still have no range estimate, but our next checkpoint is Potash Road, 5 miles away. On the original estimate that we did before we left the campground, it said that it was going to take 3% to get from here to Potash Road. So using that same logic, we're at 61% now. So I'm going to say 58% is the target for getting to the next checkpoint. So we'll see how close we are. Well, this is interesting. There's the there's the Potash Road sign. It's seen better days. Anyway, time for a check-in. So we just arrived at the Potash Road sign. Obviously, as you can see by the mess over there. 58%. Right on the money. And interestingly, so here's the 58%. Interestingly, we regained cell service on the way, and it recalculated the estimated arrival percentage, and it was exactly what we thought, 58%, just going off of the calculations from before. So that's pretty good. And it was so accurate. We were riding at 59%, and we ticked down to 58 right as we arrived at the sign. So I'm very impressed. Interesting note along with that as well is the speed limit that it displays on here has been 55 miles an hour this entire time. This is an off-road trail. There is no posted speed limit, but I can tell you, if you were going 55 miles an hour, you would get rattled to death and you would find yourself plowed into the side of a mountain. That is not a realistic speed to be going. But based on the estimated time of arrival on the GPS as well as the estimated percentage, it's very clear that it knows it's an off-road trail. You're going to be moving slowly, and the consumption and the arrival times are estimated accordingly. So I honestly did not predict that. I'm surprised, but it worked perfectly fine. So good on Rivian and Google for getting that estimate so accurate. That's impressive. I honestly thought it was tuned for on-road, but off-road trails were not a thing. But that's the end of our loop at this point, where we just make our way back to Moab. But that's our adventuring for day one. So yeah, honestly, I was quite impressed with how accurate it was. Even though the speed we were traveling was entirely different than what the map seemed to think we should have been traveling, I'm not sure where that 55-mile-an-hour speed limit came from. But the range estimates definitely knew we weren't driving 55. It knew we were going slow on these trails, and it accounted for the speed and all-wheel drive, and it seemed to be spot on. So I was honestly surprised by that. I did not see that one coming. But that was not the end of our education on this trip. Not long after we reached our last checkpoint at the Potash Sign Road that was collapsed, we actually saw the Potash Ponds, and they are just striking. They're beautiful. And just before we came into this area, we actually happened to regain cell service. And that is another huge advantage that these Rivians have, is they have a much larger and higher gain cellular antenna than you would have on your phone. And you're able to get cell reception in places that you ordinarily wouldn't be able to. And we just came into a service area just as we were coming up to the lakes. And so we asked Rivian Assistant what these ponds were, because they are a beautiful, striking blue. And we learned something. Hey, Rivian, can you see what ponds are near me right now?
You are currently near the Potash Evaporation Ponds in Moab, Utah. They are quite a sight with their bright blue color.
Hey, Rivian, can you tell me what they're used for?
The potash evaporation ponds are used in the process of mining potash. Potash is a type of salt that's super important for fertilizer. The ponds are part of a solution mining operation where water is pumped underground to dissolve the potash.
And so here I was getting educated. This whole time I thought that potash was like someone's last name or something, but no. Potash is an actual substance that's mined for use in agriculture and fertilizer, which is super cool. The more you know. That brings us to the last day on our Moab adventure. For this one, we actually had my friends Jake and Weston, who you may remember from the Disengagement Derby, and they came and joined us for our last day of off-roading. They brought their other R1T. They have two of them. They brought their quad motor Gen 1, and we had a great time and saw some amazing things. And honestly, I was just wowed by the off-road prowess that the R1 really has. It was able to just eat up this terrain, even though it was a little bit rough. And at one point we even aired down our tires. But I think this bodes extremely well for the R2, because even though it doesn't necessarily have the same crazy suspension travel and flexibility that the R1 has, it does have a lot of the same DNA with the traction system and the ground clearance and approach and departure angle and all of those things that are important for off-road. So there you have it. There was the Moab adventure. And honestly, it was a fantastic time to reconnect with my friends, my loved ones, and go out and see what a beautiful place we live. And with the launch of R2 literally just days away, I can't wait to see what kind of adventures we'll get into with that one. Until the next one. Hi, Bean.
Oh, hi. This is the most glampy, not glamping experience I've ever had.